So, welcome to the first official
Thank you, my man.
Witz Happy Hour podcast.
Love it.
This is a little bit of an experiment now, so we're all going to sort of go through a little bit of trial and error. But we've got Brent Wagyu over here, aka the Wagner, right? And we're going to have a conversation on just about everything. I think things like life, relationships, kids, wife. Maybe we'll dabble in a little bit of sales because that is your expertise and background in negotiations. So let's start with the question: How was your September? How did September work out for you?
You know, I think overall it was awesome, and yet I did very little business. Right. I mean, you and I were on the road in Salt Lake. That was fantastic.
Yeah.
But I made more inroads from a sales perspective that I really needed to kind of push along than I had done for a very long time. And part of it was because I was in pretty heavy delivery mode, for a long time, and then not much happens in the summer and everybody's away and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, well, we spoke about that, and I think what I said to you was, take a little bit of your own medicine and get out there and
Totally.
start, hustling and pounding and getting back to the outreach again, right?
You got it.
I think as salespeople, particularly the ones that teach it a lot, we tend to sometimes forget to practice what we preach, and there's nothing better than, or there's no more important skill in sales than the discipline of just the outreach.
Totally.
And you reached out to a couple guys. You had a couple clients that were kind of going dark, and you weren't sure if you were going to get paid, or you weren't sure if there was going to be a contract that popped up, and you did reach out to them.
Yeah, and you know what? I have to thank you for that because I'll be very honest, and I actually talk about anti-sales and not pitching too much and so on. And yet this one totally slipped my mind. The bottom line is that I was reaching out, and every time I was reaching out, I was trying to sell something.
Yeah.
So what's the Pavlov's kind of response, right?
Yeah.
Oh, the phone rings. It's Brent Wagner. Yeah. He must be trying to sell me something.
I don't know about you. I hate getting sold something, particularly on LinkedIn when we're getting these in-mail campaigns.
Hate it.
But I feel creepy when I'm calling up a client that I haven't heard from, or seen, or heard, or connected with in a while. And the only reason I'm calling them is purely for sales. Yep. And I'm starting with a, hey, checking in line. And it's just that ooey gooey, fuck, I'm just like everyone else. But we were also talking about the reason we end up doing that is because we don't stay the course when it comes down to client management, relationship management. We talk a lot about here at Witz, the 18-month sales cycle or the 18-month relationship build.
Yep.
And people give up. And next thing you know, you've been delivering and you have to start calling people. And it's a fucking tough spot to be. So what happened with that client? Did you end up getting back in touch with them?
So there was a couple of goals to that call. I think the one you're talking about in particular. Number one was just to reconnect and find out what was happening there. We hadn't spoken for a long time. So we did that. And it turns out there's going to be another program that we'll likely do over the next 3 months or so.
Amazing.
Maybe early in the new year.
Did you go drinking with him?
We did not.
You should.
I think that's not a bad idea.
Yeah.
No, you're at bang on. Like next time I'm downtown.
Yeah.
Even if it's just the invite, right? Because you
Don't
get points for
ask
the invite.
For a coffee. Ask for drinks.
No, let's go for a drink.
Yeah.
100%.
I once had a client turn around to me and be like, "You're the first person that's ever asked me out for a glass of wine." Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. She was like, "Everyone asked me for coffee." It's one of these downtown corporate finance sort of folks, and like everyone meets in that sort of corridor, that path, and they've got their coffee shops, a bunch of assholes running around underground. I don't know if we ever actually ended up doing business. We didn't, but I mean, still a connection that I have, definitely on social and LinkedIn, and I'm sure that opportunity will come around again, but people want to get fucked up. People need to escape from their day.
And the funny thing is that, there's just a different level of bonding that always seems to happen over a drink.
Mm-hmm.
Or
we're drinking
two,
now,
or
by
three.
the way.
Yeah, of course.
Right? Because this is the Witz Happy Hour.
And
we should be filming all the other people behind the scenes, but they don't want to drink on camera. Right? So
that's awesome.
So back to relationship building. I think one of the key things that you just said there was, as much as we teach people to do this, you don't actually practice it yourself. We get lazy as salespeople.
Sometimes we do.
Right.
And sometimes too, it's just about actually thinking about what you want to accomplish from any type of outreach before you pick up the phone and you start to read an email. Right? Because if you don't do that and you get a little bit lazy, then it can easily have the, hey, just checking in, how are you, the same bullshit.
Well, what else do you send?
Right?
What else do you send?
Well, maybe it's just, hey, I was thinking about
I like that one.
the initiative that we did a few months ago would love to know if Joseph and Lisa, really got out of it what you were hoping they got out of it.
That's great.
Right.
That's great. I was thinking about you.
Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, I might use that one from now on.
100%. Was just thinking about you, I know. And find something obscure that you remember about that person, right?
My mind went somewhere else, but okay.
as it would. But you know where I'm going, right?
I do.
And I think a lot of people just don't even know the art of taking notes, right? Like when you're taking notes, it's not about everything that you said during that meeting. It's about the little tidbits that you pick up along the way.
Yeah.
Maybe they love, I don't know, artifacts from the First World War or something like that. It doesn't matter, but
how old
whatever
are your clients that like things from the First World War?
Yeah, none,
right?
Zero. And frankly,
I hear you. I hear your point.
You know where
Find
I'm
their
going.
hobbies, connect with them on a lot of stuff.
Right. And even if it's somewhat contrived, right? If you happen to go online and Google World War I artifacts and come up on an interesting article, and then maybe you're to send it to your client or prospective client, that's not a terrible thing.
It's not. I once had a client in the U.S. government. He was into flags.
Okay. Yeah.
So I didn't realize this, but flags are like a big hobby. You could, collect flags. And some of them are like tens of thousands of dollars. I tried to use that as like an in. I just didn't know enough about flags, so it didn't really work. Right? But yeah, I hear your point.
Yeah.
So, we were just talking about basically sales management, and which requires relationship management. Let's segue. So sales negotiations, I think, if we're calling a spade, the real way we hone that is in our personal lives with our spouses and our kids.
True.
So, this is actually crossing our desk a lot, which is kids, how we're communicating with kids, how we're parenting our kids. There's a big world around, the school of thought, or there's a whole new school of thought in parenting, which literally sits with, the only framework we've ever had for parenting is what our parents raised us with, which what their parents raised them with, et cetera, et cetera. So considering the topic of kids today and relationships, wives, husbands, partners, spouses, right? How do you navigate kids today from a place of negotiations? You mentioned something earlier that you said, kids push back a lot now. There's a different level of pushback. So what would be some thoughts or comments around negotiating with your kids?
It's a really good point. Okay, so first of all, I do think that kids are always naturally going to try and find their boundaries, right? Because it's a bit of a security thing. They need to know where the boundaries are so that most of the time they can operate within them, right? So we need to understand that, and that it's part of their independence seeking type of behavior to find those boundaries and to figure out, what they can and can't do with their parents. Mm-hmm. But there are times when, we come up against a little bit of a block where the kids believe they know something or they want something or whatever it is. And they've got some sort of construct in their head that says, my parents don't have a right to deny me of this or whatever it might be, right? And I don't have all the answers on this, but I will say that, whenever I come up on that, my goal is to help them understand my point of view, even if they disagree with it.
Okay, so how do you help them understand your point of view?
Okay.
I mean, as parents, we tell a lot, right? So
we do.
You got a bunch of kids. You've got, you're like a family of bunnies.
Pretty much.
You got like 14 kids, something like that.
Something like that. Pretty close.
So
pretty close.
all sort of ages, but all jokes aside, 3-4 kids you've got?
Got 4 kids. Yep.
Okay, 4 kids, right? They're all sort of growing between the ages of 8 to
8 and
teenagers.
14.
Okay,
Yep.
So different types of conversations. So tell us about that. How do you?
Yeah, well, if you're dealing with the 8-year-old,
how do you get them to understand you?
If you're dealing with the 8-year-old, it's a lot easier, quite frankly.
Okay.
Right? They're pretty impressionable at that age. They tend to listen when you tell things in story format, right? And that's a whole other thing we could get into.
Yeah.
But when you tell stories, or the other thing I find works, especially with the younger kids, is if you flip it around and you give them a scenario that's essentially a microcosm of whatever it is that you're discussing and ask them to decide based on your point of view, now all of a sudden things are starting to come in. And they're starting to recognize that, okay, maybe you do have a point here. Mm-hmm. When you're talking to a 14-year-old, sometimes it's just obstinacy, right?
Yeah,
like
well,
they're just being obstinate.
Let's go to the 14.
Yeah.
What you basically said was anyone under 14 is easy to manipulate and manage.
Okay, let's
or
go with that. Let's
control.
go
I
with
think
that.
as parents, we try to control our children. We were talking about this earlier.
Fair.
But, what do you do with the 14-year-old? In fact, like almost the 14-year-old is like that difficult like client. You use the words obstinance.
Obstinance. Yeah. Well,
surprised
actually,
I
that's
was
more my
actually able to say
13-year-old daughter. But okay, so let me think about.
So
my
wait, you got a
14-year-old.
14-year-old boy and a 13-year-old daughter.
You got it.
Okay, so let's talk about both because there's
Okay.
probably two very different
They are.
ways of navigating one, the teenage daughter versus the teenage son. And
No
they're pretty
question.
much the same age at 13, 14.
They're
In fact,
close.
the girl's
They're
probably
only
even
16
older.
months apart. Yeah. So they're close.
What
in
do they
age.
call that? Kissing cousins?
That's pretty something like Irish twins.
Irish twins.
Irish twins.
Kissing cousins is something different.
Yeah, that's nothing like it. But that's you're close. Nothing like it, but close.
That's funny. So
14-year-old boy. Okay, I paint a very, very quick picture. Tall guy, matured early, very good-looking dude. He's an athletic guy, but intensely sensitive.
Okay.
Right? So I have to be
What's he
very
sensitive to?
about just about anything that is not you're the best thing since sliced bread.
Okay, now does that have anything to do with the fact that like you parented him in this perfect?
The helicopter came down.
The helicopter, the you're going to be this perfect athlete, my perfect boy.
Perfect
Even
boy.
the way you described him, he's handsome, he's athletic, he's muscular, he's tall, etc., etc. So and now he's overly sensitive to criticism.
True.
Maybe you should have beat him as a kid. Maybe you should have hit him more.
They tell you this stuff in school, but I'm not sure.
Right.
Anyway.
But no, go back to the sensitivity.
So I think to actually put a point on what you just said, I actually think that they're linked. I think that one of the reasons that he's so sensitive is because things came very easily to him, right? School, girls, sports, they all came fairly easily to him. So he's not used to being told that, he needs to improve on X, Y, or Z. And so when he does get that kind of feedback, it tends to kind of set him on his heels a little bit, and he can get pretty defensive. So he is a bit of a Pandora's box when you're trying to give him good feedback and or try and negotiate with him, right?
Okay, so what's the feedback you're going to give him?
Okay, so let's say a lot of this, quite frankly, it comes around hockey, right? So, he's a competitive hockey player. I played when I was, younger as well. Anyway, long story short is that there are times when he doesn't play to his ability. Quite frankly, that's my biggest knock against my 14-year-old. Awesome kid, but a lot of times he gets a little comfortable, right? So then how do you approach that in a way that's not going to have him, set so far back on his heels that he digs in and then rejects anything that you're going to say? And I don't have the perfect formula for this, but I believe it's about making him feel good about himself first, right?
Okay.
You know how good a hockey player you are, dude. You know that I would never question
So
that
you're
about
doing
you,
the
you know?
exact same thing that caused the fucking problem to begin with.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Right? I
Yes.
think, JD, you're going to have a lot of opinion on this. You want to jump in on this one? Come on, let's jump in. So JD's an obviously pro athlete and pro coach and has a tremendous amount of thought and background and expertise in sports and kids and stuff. So, I don't think we should be broaching this topic without... No.
I think you should come in here. I have a feeling you've got a couple of cents to add.
Come.
Okay. Yeah.
Jump in.
Jump in.
Okay, so keep going. So you were saying that... Okay, now first off, let me ask you this. Did he ask for the feedback?
No. And that's where things usually kind of go off the rails a bit.
Yeah.
Right?
And
So no, he did not.
Yeah, and here's the trick. As parents, our intention is to support them, and our intention is to point out things that we see. But especially at 14, they don't want to hear those things from us.
So how do you?
It's a good point. So I'm going to ask you, how do you do that?
You ask them if they're open to any feedback.
I think that's a very good point.
Because as a 14-year-old, he's also trying to even primitively establish his own independence.
Yes.
He's trying to show that I may love you and I still need support and acknowledgement from you, but I don't need you.
Right.
So he's actually going to, in his bones, push back on things you say, not because it's not the right information, because he's trying to establish his own pattern.
I think that's totally fair. Okay, so let me ask you this. Because of the dynamic between us, the answer to are you open to a little feedback is almost undoubtedly going to be yes. Whether he wants it or not.
He's going to say yes?
Probably.
Okay.
Yes.
But then you're also you say, okay, so what did you like about what you did? You know, what was good, like to your point, what did you feel was awesome about what you did? Because then you ease them into him being able to talk about, here's what I feel like I did good, Dad. Like I thought I did this well. And then you say, okay, what do you think you could do more of? So it's a way of opening up the opportunity to talk about the critique without it being a criticism.
Yep. I think you're bang on.
And I agree with Greg's earlier point, I think where he was starting to go, in terms of we do need to make sure we're helping kids build up their resilience.
Totally.
But we have to be careful about where it's going to come from. You know, you can help him build resilience in terms of dynamics between you and him in other ways. But if you try to coach him too much, your role isn't coach. Your role is dad.
Yeah, okay, so say more to that to me. So what's the difference between coach and dad?
And I say this from years of experience in working with kids and athletes and working with a lot of really amazing sports psychologists. And your role as dad is to love and support. Full stop. It's not to coach. It's to it's to say, what can I do to help support you, and to ask respectfully, are you open to any observations that I might have seen, or not? And if he says no, you say okay.
So I don't disagree with what you're saying, but I have to push back a little. So I have to say, as adults and parents, we do have a responsibility to guide what we would think is the right behavior, or the behavior that is going to set them up for success later in life.
Yes,
right?
Agreed.
So I would define that as coaching to a certain extent, right?
Yes.
So how do you weave that in to a conversation where there may be a bit of a stalemate or a roadblock that's put up, but you know that there's an opportunity to help open the mind and to see things in a slightly different way?
Can I take this?
Yeah.
You're talking two different things here, right? One, you've been given the role as coach as the parent. So to give them feedback that they're going to operate better in life and they're going to be able to make better decisions and, survive and think. This is your birthright or the right as a parent, right? What JD was saying was you don't have that right as the sports coach as well.
Fair.
So we need to separate, hey, behavior and how you're showing up and the choices you're making in life, that's your 100% coaching responsibility.
And that's fair.
But this is why we pay for them to be part of these hockey camps and academies and leagues and teams where we don't. It's the same way a doctor can't treat their own family or a real estate agent can't sell their own house, right? It's because there's a personal connection that you'll never be able to separate there. So I think the answer to that, and what JD was saying is like your responsibility is to be dad, is I think we hear these things at like the superficial level, which is, as dad, I'm going to fucking, guide him and parent him and tell him what to do and make sure he does well in life. But there's the deeper conversation, which is your role in sport.
Yes, I think you're right.
Specifically to be dad. Not you played well, you played bad, you should skate harder, you should skate this way, you should practice more, you should be like, great game.
Well, and a great phrase is, I love watching you play.
Yeah.
And that's it. And this is my last thing and then I'll go. But
the
other part too is I get it when sometimes you're also watching coaches, because here's the thing is we always hope we've got expert coaches with our kids, and it's not always the case.
It's not always the case, yeah.
So it's hard sometimes, and I'm starting to experience with my kids, is where I'm like, oh my God, I so want to jump in and correct here because this thing is going missed. So that's where too, again with 14, it's asking, hey, are you open to something? Or if you notice they're bummed, what's up, bud? Did you want to talk about it?
Yep.
Are you open to any ideas? And then if they say yes, it's sharing some thoughts and then letting them sit with it. And kids usually, especially 14, 15, because they're so wrapped up in emotion, they need more time to sit with
Right.
things.
I agreed. And I do forget that sometimes. I really do when it comes to that. Now, and he's actually a pretty damn respectful and mature kid. He will say, Dad, I just need a little bit of time to think about this.
Yeah, fair enough.
Which is cool, right? And then I kind of back right off.
Oh my God. And the fact that he knows that about himself at
Yeah.
14, 15, and if he can vocalize that, you want him to know how to vocalize that with his future partner.
100%.
To be able to say, babes, I need some time, right?
Yep.
So then you can say, okay, so how do you want to circle back to this? Do you want me to check in with you later, or are you going to come back to me? Because I have some thoughts I think might help. Let me know if you want to hear them. And then you leave it at that. It's like you're offering a platter, and then they get to decide if they're going to take it or not.
Mm-hmm. It's very true.
Yeah. Okay, I'm leaving.
Look at this. I didn't even think I would be learning parenting advice here.
Yeah, who knew?
The happy hour, Witz happy hour. I'm learning parenting. It's fantastic shit.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
It's good. I think, all jokes aside, I think we need another microphone, and I think you and I need to interview. Sure. Like, we'll be the interviewers, the back and forth. So
Like
microdosing is a big thing now,
Yes, I know.
right? But you need to do it with someone that actually knows what the fuck
Exactly.
doing,
And
right?
that's the thing. It's just not that prevalent yet, right?
Yeah,
I would love to.
It
But
is, and there's also the peyote runs in the jungle and like stuff like that. The journeys that you go on.
Right.
But if you're in a sensitive mind, or if you are a sensitive mind, it's probably maybe not the best thing for you.
No, I think I honestly do believe that there is an inherent thing here. Like this is just a genetic part of me.
Yeah.
And that's cool. Like, but one of the worst things that I could do is deny that fact.
Yeah.
Because if I deny that fact, then it sends you on this mindset trip of, okay, you know what? I can be down and miserable and all the rest of it, but that's just life.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And if you get into that mindset, now you're really fucked.
Yeah.
Because you lose hope.
1,000%.
Right?
1,000%.
And as soon as you lose hope, you're fucked.
Yeah. Your survival brain switches off.
Yeah.
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 Look,
You're
mental
fucked.
health is a very, very, serious thing.
It is.
It's as severe as cancer. Someone that is diagnosed with cancer versus someone that's diagnosed with mental health is as severe, but society doesn't look at it that way.
You're absolutely right. And if you look at the way the medical system works, I mean, Christ, you can't even fucking run a therapy session through OHIP, right? I mean, holy shit, how many treatments happen in a hospital every fucking day that cost $120 just to open a syringe or some shit, right?
Yep.
That's about the cost of a therapy session to really fucking help somebody mentally. And yet, we decide we don't pay for that. It's crazy. I mean, that just shows you the stigma that is still out there around mental health. We don't put enough time to it. We don't think about it enough. And, our politicians are still in the camp where it's not sexy to actually champion it, right? So it goes nowhere.
Well, I think the world is becoming more, particularly in North America, more aware of mental health. I think,
Yeah, I believe that's true. I do.
Corporations, in fact, we were recently at an event which was put on by corporate, for corporate, that said, as corporate organizations, we need to be looking after mental health. And, we could actually give props to, I think they're Headway, right?
Okay.
Headway,
Awesome.
amazing. And their whole sort of position is, this needs to be lived in companies as much as it's lived in home. My father suffered with depression, severe depression.
And how long would he be down for?
Months. Like when he was down, when he was low, he was low, and he was a very intense dude. So when he was up, he was up.
Right.
And it was peaks and valleys, and it was,
Dude, you and I know intensity, right?
right. But
Right. So you got to be susceptible to this a bit too,
1,000%,
right?
1,000%. I work very hard on my mental health. I in a lot of regards, I think I've figured out my balance in life.
Yep.
That's including my relationships, my parenting, my intake, whether it be alcohol, whether it be weed, whether how I work, like the fights, the conflicts I put myself in, because I'm a sensitive personality. I'm susceptible to the highs and lows. And don't get me wrong, there's been lows, but I think on the other side, I've also surrounded myself with a very strong group of people.
I would say
work
that's
and,
true.
and home. So, it's you lean on people. I think the thing you got to be very careful about with mental health, and if you talk about depression, is trying to go at it on your own.
Yes, 100%
Right?
true.
I think two actual, if I'm going to be bold enough to say it, I think two main problems we have. We'll throw medicine or we'll throw drugs at it pretty quickly.
That's 100% true. Of course it is.
And because it's mental health is related to, if you ask many different thought leaders about this, it's related to a lot of aspects of your life: stress, emotions, communication, relationships, decisions, money, right? Genetics is absolutely part of it. Mm-hmm. I know I am genetically inclined to cancer, right? My father passed away from it. His brothers had cancer twice. His father passed. Like, I was part of a genetic study. Like, we know that, like, I'm pre-cancer, right? So you get screened and you manage it, and you manage it that way. That's the genetic side of things. Mm-hmm. And that also applies to your mental, sort of, call it stability,
that's an interesting concept.
Heredity, or you
really
said it earlier.
Interesting concept. How do you do mental screening? I mean, now that's a Pandora's box, right? But if there was some rigor put to the same type of mentality around preventative medicine, which in the end costs us a hell of a lot less, right? Then that would be pretty cool for mental health.
Look, the biggest
right?
preventative medicine is like how we raise our kids. Like, it all starts there.
Very true.
We were talking about this earlier. Our parents have never had a fucking framework for how we were raised. Mm-hmm. I have the typical crazy fucking 80s kids, I'm sure you do as well, story. We used to get hit by fucking friends' parents, right? It was, emotions, mental well-being was very different. Their parents before them.
Always.
It's been really, really fucked up. We're only now starting to scratch the surface. And I still don't think we're getting it all that right when it comes down to parenting, which is the ultimate preventative, is how do we build these healthy, physically and mentally and emotionally, kids who are resilient, who are confident, who are able to make decisions, who are able to balance with emotions. So, right? We made a joke about snowplow parenting.
That is the question, right? I mean, if we're going to get right to the core of it, I still remember the moment in my life where I just finally got this belief and was able to pull it out of my hands and actually put it into words. And we were riding bikes, and I was with, I think there was two of my hockey friends, 13 years old. And I remember exactly where we were on the path. And I remember thinking, I know what the meaning of life is. It's to have children.
I didn't.
Isn't that?
I wasn't going to have kids.
Yeah. Isn't that, I mean, if you're like literally, isn't that kind of the meaning of life?
Yeah, to procreate.
To procreate, to perpetuate life.
That's it. You want to spread your seed. You're just a pervert. That's why you want to have kids.
Well, there's that too. I mean, we're men.
So, no, but all jokes aside, absolutely, you do. I didn't look at it that romantically, nor did I look at having kids as something that I was even capable of doing. I'm thrilled I had kids. My children are fucking beautiful, and I just pray to God I don't fuck them up too much. But it's this conversation that I try to think about a lot when it comes down to my own kids, which is, I see it in my son. And I'm still too hard on him, but like if I mismanage that too much, he
shuts down.
He shuts down, and that's gonna affect him later. And my daughter as well. As tough as I think she is, there's a balance there too. So, look, I think circling around to this, mental health is a topic that is widely covered, and there's a lot of research and thought in it, and I think we're just two guys talking about it. But if there's one thing to sort of take away from this, I would say that, like, you mentioned preventative medicine. I think it's the best preventative medicine is raising these kids so they're not mentally fucked up later.
I think you're bang on.
Right?
I really do.
Otherwise, they turn into me and you. Right?
We don't want that.
No, which in some regards, it works out. And this diagnosis of ADD and this and stuff like that, I also think it's a very misunderstood as well.
I do too. I felt, I felt a little off when I had got that, because I was like, this has been right in front of everybody's face for years.
Every creative genius I know, whether you use the thing like, ordinary people that are doing extraordinary things. I know you want to do that thing, but like, they're all ADD. All the
right.
creatives we worked with were ADD. Right? He's ADD.
But it's the truth, though. I mean, that's where all the craziness comes in. That's where all the interesting stuff comes in, right? It's not the monotone that is anywhere near interesting or intriguing. It's always the intensity, and that comes from a bit of crazy, to be honest. Perfect.
Narcissism.
Okay.
You just
the role
said
of narcissism in success.
Okay. Are you asking me or am I asking you?
You ask whatever you want to ask.
Okay, so I'll ask you because technically you're the guest.
Yeah. Okay.
So, what do you think about? So, all right. First, we just had a very deep conversation. I feel much closer to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
But you just brought up success needs narcissism, or the correlation between the right amount of narcissism for success. So go with that thought. Tell me what you're thinking.
Okay. I'm going to paint a picture here. I think the metaphor, the right one, is this. You know when you're having a round of golf, and you know you're going to have a few beers, right? And you know that when you're going to go out for that round, you know, your first hole might be, whatever, okay. Your second hole, whatever. Oh, but the cart girl comes around on the second hole, right? And you order a beer, and you have maybe 3 or 4 beers.
Cart person, by the way.
Cart person, sorry. Yes, cart person. We need to be correct, okay? So now you got 3, 4 beers in you, and all of a sudden your golf game has gotten very, very good, right?
Okay.
You know, you've taken away some of the thinking and the overthinking and the
inhibitions,
all that, and you're loose, and your swing's good and all the rest of it, right?
Okay.
And then you have your 5th drink, and all of a sudden you're shit-faced. You can't do anything right. It just falls off a cliff, and it happens very quickly because the peak is a very, very fine edge.
Yeah.
I think a certain level of narcissism is not only, advisable, but necessary for people to get to a certain level in their life. Okay? And I think that, it's a very, very fine edge with which, somebody has enough narcissism to push them on and to keep them with, grandiose visions and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
Right? Like it takes to be really
1,000%.
exceptional in this world. Right? And too much where people see it and it's too visible and it sends you off the fucking cliff and you're nobody.
That's your golf analogy.
That's
There's
the
the link. So so what you just said was hey, everyone needs to have the right level of narcissism in order to be successful, which I agree with.
Fucked. Which is weird.
It's
or
not
maybe
fucked.
even it's just perceived.
It's not perceived.
Narcissism.
It's not fucked. It's based in psychology that if you look at all personalities, we demonstrate all of those personality disorders.
Yeah.
Narcissism, passive aggressive, impulsive, obsessive, dependent. And where it becomes a disorder is obviously where one of those becomes too much, becomes unbalanced or out of balance.
Where it's the whack-a-mole, you just can't bat down.
Right. But by having the right balance of each, you know when to be narcissistic.
Right.
You know when to be dependent.
Yep.
You know when to be obsessive. Or you use obsessive traits in certain tasks and functions.
Isn't that the craft?
That is the craft.
That's the art of it,
That
isn't
is
it?
the art of it, right? So, the joke is you're a little fucked up. I'm a little fucked up. But the more you get that fucked upness in balance, the more successful you're going to hit. Look, you and I both speak in front of rooms. You got to have a narcissistic...
just to get there.
And not only that, to your point, if you are too narcissistic or you come across as a narcissist in front of a room, it's too much.
Right.
The room will fail you.
100%.
But if you don't have enough of that grit, that narcissism, those
That's exactly
thank
you. See,
you ain't moving people, right?
Dude, so fucking, I know, but you fucking get it though.
Yeah.
The thing is that you get it, and I don't know how many people do, because I see a lot of the extremes. I see a lot of the ones who fall off the cliff because they just became too fucking big for their own personalities, or the ones who never take a fucking risk. You deal with a lot of
people in finance, right? So
oh my God, they're everywhere.
If you look at those motherfuckers, they are the the pinnacle of narcissists, and they are, a lot of them, while they might achieve tremendous amount of success, not just within business but personal, one of those sides ends up failing them.
Yes.
They end up failing in business, or they end up failing in their personal lives, families, relationships, etc., because it becomes imbalanced. The trick to all of this is always adjusting that barometer, that dial. You know, you can never just turn that narcissism or that behavior up to a certain level and keep it there. As you grow through life, you're going to have to adjust that dial.
Yeah,
you
that's
have to
fair.
say,
I think that's
hey,
fair.
I now need to dial this narcissism down, or hey, I need to dial it back up. And you know, I think by giving yourself the space to lean into it and be a little excessive in some of those behaviors, you're good. I was talking about this the other day. You know, what do you do with withdrawn personalities? Passive personalities. Passive personalities in the sense that these individuals or people have had permission to avoid and withdraw on certain things.
Right. And maybe we're even rewarded for doing so.
And we're rewarded because what most people do is they say things like, oh, shame. You know, take it easy, be nice. Don't, I don't want to say it, right? And you're doing that individual a great injustice, because what's going to build that resilience and that effectiveness, or that personality in some capacity, is the opposite. 100%. Leaning into that and saying, hey, wait a minute, like, no, you don't get to fuck around and avoid and withdraw and take the high road in this, right?
Right.
Anyway, it's...
well, I think the withdrawn tend to be rather afraid of failure. So what ends up happening, right? Oh, I know it. But the withdrawn are almost like the extreme of that. Mm-hmm.